Hey guys, my name's Doug with infotainment.com. Today we're in the 2015 and up Ford Mustang. I'm going to show you guys a great new upgrade we have here. We're going to upgrade this analog cluster to the full digital cluster. I'm going to show you guys step by step on how to do it and how awesome it is once it's installed. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is disconnect the negative battery terminal. Just because we're going to be playing, we'll have to remove the airbag. And when you're kind of fooling with the airbag, sometimes you might inadvertently beep the horn, stuff like that. So we'll just set that aside. All right, the first thing we're gonna wanna do is remove the airbag. Now to remove the airbag, you'll notice on each side of the steering wheel, there'll be a little hole there. So that little hole, basically all you're gonna do is use a small flathead screwdriver. You're gonna stick that into the hole and you're going to feel for a spring. Basically, you're gonna depress that spring and at the same time pull the airbag out. You're gonna do that on the right side and the left side. You'll notice here, the spring that we're pressing is this one here. So as we press it, this guy here, it loosens up the airbag enough so we can pop it out. So we're pushing in this little spring here and this little one here. All right, now we're gonna remove the 3 connectors. So we're gonna pull down on these little orange tabs. And then there's a red one down here for the switch. Pull that back, and then they just come out. We can now set the airbag aside. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna unplug this connector here, which plugs into the clock spring. Just press the tab and remove it. Then we're gonna remove this bolt here, which is a 24 millimeter. At this time, if you want to, you could take a picture of the steering wheel and the configuration of where it is with your phone. That'll kind of help you when you go to put it back on. So then you can just remove the steering wheel. All right, so for the 2015 through 2017 Mustangs, you're gonna want to replace 3 switches. You're gonna replace the upper left, upper right, and lower right. In order to get access to them, you're just gonna remove the Torx T20 screws to easily swap them out. You notice now the volume is going to be on the left side. All right, now that we have all the switches in place, we can go ahead and reinstall our screws. All right, now what we want to do is pull up on the upper steering column trim. It just pops up. All right, to remove the lower trim, you're gonna have a Torx T20 screw here, and then up in here you'll have a 7 millimeter screw. All right, we're gonna go ahead and lower it to give us a little bit more room. This just kind of pops up like I mentioned, and then down the lower one, kind of work your way around. the perimeter, slowly bring it down. Now what you're going to want to do is kind of pull out on the steering column and down, and then lock it into place. It gives you enough room to get the 2 Torx T20 screws that are up here. So we'll go ahead and disconnect the connectors. There's one up front here, and there's one on the side here, kind of behind the blinker. All right, we're gonna go ahead and pull our connector here out. And then below the clock spring is a little tab. You're gonna wanna pull the tab down and slide it out of place. All right, now that we have the old clock spring removed, you can take the new clock spring tab and keep it and put it in here if you want. But this is going to be set aside. You'll no longer use the old one. At this point, a lot of you will opt to put the new one in, follow the same procedure in reverse to install it using the same screws and hardware. But I'm going to keep it off for the time being because now we have to remove the actual cluster itself, and it's going to be a little bit easier without this in the way. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this lower trim panel here. It's just held in with retaining clips. You can use a pry tool or a regular screwdriver, but basically you just get behind it and it pops out of place. That exposes 3 7mm screws. All right, now we're going to remove this piece here, which is for your headlights. Again, just held in retaining clips. Then the bottom side, you're just going to unplug the connector. Next, we're going to remove this trim plate here, which also pops right out. You can disconnect the connector that's for the trunk release and set this aside. All right, a couple more panels to remove. This one here also just pops right out. Now we're going to remove the passenger side lower trim here. Then we can pull off the top part of the dash. That's our last trim piece to remove. All right, now we have 4 7mm screws to remove. We have one here, here, and then 2 under the air vent there. Once the screws are removed, you could just pop it out of place. All right, now at this point, all we gotta do is pull back on our cluster and it comes right out of place. We just disconnect this connector here. All right, guys, now the fun part. So if you have a 2015, 16, or 17, you'll need to trim this back plate out. It's not as bad as it looks, but you use 2 8mm screws to pull these 2 out. And then you're gonna trim right along here, right where this bend is. You're gonna trim this back here. You're gonna trim right here, leaving this exposed. You're gonna trim right above this screw here, where that goes. Trim that, and then trim up in the corner. Once you do that, you'll be able to pull this out and we can install the new cluster. All right, went ahead and trimmed here, trimmed right here, and then back up in here. The camera probably can't see it, but just a little portion there. Once you do that, you can kind of wedge this plastic piece out. Now, you don't have to use a Dremel tool. There's all different, people use hacksaws. I mean, you could use really anything, and it doesn't need to be all pretty. This is all gonna be hidden. So what I like to do is just kind of pull it out a little bit, and then I can trim across here. Behind it is an air duct, so I don't want to disrupt that too much, and even if I do, I can always just patch it up a little bit. But I'm just going to run a line right along here. It should go real nice and quick. All right, just comes right out. Now what I'll do is I'll just get a vacuum and I'll clean this all up in here and we'll get ready to install our cluster. That whole process took me probably 3 or 4 minutes. Remember guys, don't be intimidated by it. It's really quick, really easy. Worst thing you got to do is just vacuum up some of these little frays here. All right guys, we're now ready to install our digital cluster. So it's going to go in the exact same way the other cluster was in. Now it has enough room to sit back there. Some people opt to put a little bit of foam back here. It's not necessary. Some people do it as a precaution. In this particular case, we're not. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and plug it in and then slide it back into place. And the only two screws we're really going to worry about here, once we put in the bezel, is just these two screws here that'll hold it in place. You notice if you kind of move it around, it's not really bumping into anything. Some people just like to have that reassurance that, you know, they could put a little bit of foam behind it or something like that. We can now install the new bezel. And once it snaps into place, you'll notice two little guide pins right here on the right side and a little guide pin on the left side. That'll allow you to line it up straight so it's nice and flush. We can see from the inside it's nice and flush, and we can go ahead and drive in our two screws here. All right, we're gonna go ahead and install the replacement here. This will just slide into place. All right, we know we have it in enough to where we could put our two screws in, our Torx screws. Those will go in. And then we have the two connectors. We'll plug into the bottom, and then this one plugs in behind the blinker. All right guys, now all we have to do is just put the upper and lower trim pieces back on, and then reinstall the two screws at the bottom. All right, now that those are pressed together, we can install our two screws. All right, we can pull our lock off. This, like I said, you could put on the old clock spring. But basically, what we have to do now is feed our airbag wires in. And then push in on it. And if you remember, this gray plug here will plug right back in. That's coming from the steering wheel. This is for our horn, and these are for our airbag. Now at this point, we got in the exact same location we were at before. So we're gonna go ahead and reinstall our steering wheel bolt. All right, now all we have to do is just pop our airbag back on, plug our three plugs back in, push our tab back in. All right guys, I actually took the steering wheel back off to give us more slack on the airbag connectors. You don't want to run it through the bottom here, you want to run it through the top next to the main clock spring plug. So that's what we did. That'll just give us a little bit more room to work. You don't have to, but that's how it is from the factory, so we'll do it that way. All right, now that we have our connectors plugged in, airbag just pops right in. All right guys, now that we have the dash, everything buttoned up and back in its place, I'm gonna show you guys a little bit about how it works, but before I do, I wanna tell you guys a little bit about what we do here at Infotainment. Not only do we do the clusters, but as you can see in this particular vehicle, we are in the Mustang GT base model. It had the 4-inch screen in it. We put in the factory Sync 3 GPS navigation system. The 8-inch screen here. This has embedded Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Just an awesome system here. We sell a lot of them here at Infotainment. We also do satellite radio, HD radio upgrades, all factory parts, guys. Some other things that we do here at Infotainment is we do replacement leather. You can go from cloth to leather. We have custom cat skin kits on our website, infotainment.com. We also have DIY videos that show you step by step on how to install leather in your Mustang. So just a few things to check us out on. But without further ado, let's go ahead and fire it up and check out the cluster. So right away, you see the gauges pop up here. Just an awesome, awesome upgrade. It just looks so neat. So you'll now notice the volume and the preset seeks are on the left, and then your main cluster controls are here on the right. And then obviously we are in the 16 model at this time, so you have the lower switch here. So anyways, I'll bring your attention here to the cluster itself. What you can do is go into, by pressing the pony or the Mustang icon, you can get in here and do all sorts of fun stuff, change the way the gauges look. For instance, you can go to configure my gauges, come in here and show what you want on it. You can go to the cluster appearance. There are different versions. You have a normal version, the Sport, and the Track. I personally like the Sport a lot. You can also change it with the drive mode. So as you toggle the drive mode switch on your center stack bezel, it'll automatically change. So the normal mode looks like this. You have the miles per hour on the right and the tach on the left. You can go into the Sport mode, which just changes it up a little bit. You now have your tach wrapped around, which is pretty neat. And then also Track, which changes it up, which just gives you a whole different look and feel. Another thing I wanted to point out quick too is we did go ahead and install a factory GPS nav in this vehicle. Something that's really cool about this cluster, you could press the nav button on your steering wheel control here, and you could go to a previous destination, which is, say you want to go home.
Obey traffic laws, be alert, and use voice commands while driving. Please proceed to the highlighted route, and then the route guidance will start.
So basically, you can activate nav straight from your steering wheel control. So it'll pop up right on your screen, and it takes you where you need to go. So that's another really cool feature there. Let's take it out and show you guys what it looks like on the road. Oh, we do have it on the track mode now. So let's go ahead and take it out. So as you can see, it totally changes the look and feel of your Mustang while you're driving. Anyways, guys, come check us out, infotainment.com. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this upgrade. Thanks for watching.